All right, so we've got a pretty interesting set of sources here today. Articles and notes and even a YouTube video all about UFOs and drones, but with a twist, right? It's not about whether they're real or not, but what if this whole thing is like a big psychological operation?
Yeah, it's a fascinating angle, and especially with that shift we've seen recently.
Oh, yeah.
The government used to be totally silent on UFOs, and now all of a sudden they're talking about UAPs quite openly. It makes you wonder why now.
Exactly. It's like the narrative changed overnight. And speaking of narratives, that YouTube video you sent over features Chase Hughes.
Oh, yeah.
Who is an expert in psychological operations, or PSYOPs.
PSYOPs Hughes has got such a unique perspective on this whole UFO drone phenomenon. He actually suggests that this surge in sightings could be part of a calculated 3-stage PSYOP.
Okay, whoa. Before we get into those stages, can we just break down what a PSYOP actually is? I think it's important to have a clear understanding of that before we dive deeper.
Absolutely. I think that's a great place to start. So a PSYOP, it's essentially a planned operation that's designed to influence emotions, motives, and ultimately the behavior of a target audience.
Okay.
You can think of it as a way to shape perception, steer people towards a desired outcome.
So it's not just about spreading propaganda or misinformation.
Not necessarily. I mean, while those can be elements of it, PSYOPs are often much more subtle and sophisticated.
Okay.
They can involve a mix of truths, half-truths, and even outright falsehoods, all carefully crafted to create a specific narrative.
Gotcha.
And they often leverage existing fears, beliefs, and cultural narratives to make that narrative more believable, more impactful.
It's like a carefully orchestrated play.
Yeah.
With all these different actors and storylines all working together to achieve a very specific goal.
That's a great analogy. And like any good play, a successful PSYOP relies on creating that sense of suspense, uncertainty, even fear.
Which brings us back to these recent UFO and drone activities. If this is a PSYOP, what are the possible goals here?
Well, one possibility, and it's a big one, is distraction. We're living in a time of immense global uncertainty, economic instability, political polarization, climate change.
Yeah, for sure.
Creating a new and even bigger perceived threat could be a way to divert attention from all these pressing issues that we're facing.
So instead of focusing on, let's say, a struggling economy,
right,
we're all looking up at the sky wondering if we're about to be invaded by aliens.
Exactly. And when people are afraid, they're much more likely to accept solutions offered by authority figures, even if those solutions involve sacrificing some of their freedoms.
That's a chilling thought. So fear is a powerful tool in a PSYOP.
Absolutely. Hughes emphasizes this point repeatedly. Fear can be incredibly effective in unifying people and making them more willing to follow those who promise security and protection.
Okay, so we've got distraction and exploiting fear as potential motives here. But how would a UFO-themed PSYOP actually play out? What are these 3 stages that Hughes talks about?
Right. So the first stage, according to Hughes, is normalization. It's all about gradually introducing the idea of extraterrestrial activity into the mainstream.
Okay.
Making it seem less fringe and more believable.
And haven't we already kind of seen that happening? You think about the shift in language from UFOs to the more official-sounding UAPs.
Yeah.
The constant leaks of grainy footage, even those congressional hearings. It's all been contributing to this sense that, hey, maybe aliens are real after all.
Exactly. And it's not just about the government either. You see this normalization happening in pop culture with TV shows, movies, video games, increasingly featuring themes of alien contact. It's like they're slowly conditioning us to accept this idea as part of our reality.
So the more we hear about UFOs and UAPs from various sources, the less strange and outlandish it all seems.
Precisely. And that sets the stage for the second stage, the big reveal. This is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Hughes predicts a major event, something designed to solidify that perceived threat and really ramp up the fear factor.
So we're talking a massive UFO sighting over a major city, something that looks like an attack. Maybe even using advanced technology like holograms or drones to create a truly convincing spectacle.
Right. And this is where historical precedents can offer some unsettling insights.
What kind of precedents are we talking about?
Well, the Gulf of Tonkin incident in 1964 is a prime example. The U.S. government used fabricated reports of attacks on Navy ships to justify escalating the Vietnam War.
Oh, that's right. And it wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. It was a deliberate manipulation of information.
Exactly.
To create a pretext for military action.
Exactly. And there's also Operation Northwoods, a declassified plan from 1962, where U.S. officials actually proposed staging fake terrorist attacks on American soil to justify military action against Cuba.
That's chilling.
Yeah.
Thankfully, that plan was never implemented.
Yeah.
But it shows you the lengths to which some governments are willing to go to manipulate public perception and achieve their goals.
Precisely.
Right.
And that's why it's so important to be aware of these tactics and to critically evaluate information, especially when it comes to something as potentially impactful as a perceived alien threat.
Okay, so stage 1 is normalization. Stage 2 is the big reveal. A major event designed to trigger fear and uncertainty. What's stage 3?
Stage 3 is the savior. After the initial shock and fear of the big reveal, governments, or perhaps even a global alliance, they step in and present themselves as the solution. They promise to protect us from this perceived extraterrestrial threat, but to do so, they need more power, more resources, more control.
It's a classic power grab disguised as a rescue mission.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Hughes argues that this is precisely what they might be setting us up for with this potential UFO-themed PSYOP.
This is all a lot to process. We've covered a lot of ground here, from defining PSYOPs to understanding potential motives and even exploring these historical precedents. But I think we need to delve deeper into those 3 stages.
Yeah.
Really unpack the mechanics of how they could be implemented. What do you think?
Absolutely. There's a lot more to uncover. Let's continue this conversation in the next part of our deep dive. Welcome back. Let's dive a little deeper into those 3 stages of a potential psychological operation that Chase Hughes outlines in that YouTube video.
Yeah, I'm ready to unpack this further.
Yeah.
We left off talking about stage 1 normalization.
Right.
How exactly would they go about making this idea of extraterrestrial activity seem normal?
Well, it's a gradual process, almost like turning up the heat so slowly you don't even realize you're being boiled, you know?
Yeah.
Like that saying, think about those leaked UFO videos you mentioned, the grainy footage, the ambiguous shapes.
Right. They never quite show enough to be conclusive, but they're just intriguing enough
Exactly.
to spark that curiosity and speculation.
It plants a seed of doubt, makes people start to question what they thought they knew. And then you have those official hearings that you mentioned, those play a crucial role too.
Because when the government starts taking something seriously, people pay attention.
Exactly. Those hearings, even if they don't provide any concrete answers, they legitimize the topic. Suddenly, it's not just fringe conspiracy theorists talking about UFOs.
Right.
It's senators and intelligence officials.
So it's a combination of feeding these like tantalizing bits of information through unofficial channels and then lending it credibility through official channels.
Exactly. And let's not forget the subtle shift in language, too. Moving away from the term UFO, which carries, a lot of baggage and pop culture associations, to the more neutral and scientific sounding UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, it plays a significant role.
It makes it sound more official, less like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Precisely. It helps to strip away some of that stigma and allows people to engage with the topic in a more serious way. But normalization isn't just about government actions and official pronouncements.
Right. You mentioned pop culture earlier.
Yeah, think about how many TV shows, movies, video games now feature themes of alien contact.
It's true.
It's become increasingly common, almost expected.
Yeah, it's not just the cheesy alien invasion flicks anymore.
Yeah.
We're seeing these more nuanced and thought-provoking portrayals of extraterrestrial life.
And that's all part of the process, too. It helps to normalize the idea, make it feel less fantastical and more plausible. By the time stage 2 rolls around, the public is already primed to accept the possibility of alien life.
Which brings us to the big reveal. That dramatic event that's designed to solidify the threat. What are some of the hallmarks of this stage?
Well, according to Hughes, it has to be something visually impactful, something that grabs people's attention and evokes a really strong emotional response. Think about Orson Welles' War of the Worlds broadcast back in 1938.
Oh yeah, that's a classic example of how media can create mass panic. People actually thought Martians were invading.
Exactly. Now imagine that scenario, but with today's technology, we're talking advanced drones that could mimic the movements of unidentified aircraft.
Wow.
Holographic projections that could create these convincing images in the sky.
Even deepfakes that could fabricate footage of world leaders addressing the alien threat.
Precisely. With the tools we have now, it wouldn't be that difficult to stage a truly convincing event that would have people believing we're under attack.
It's a scary thought, but it makes sense.
Hughes also talks about the importance of timing during this stage.
Yeah.
Why is that so significant?
Timing is crucial in any PSYOP. Think back to those historical examples we discussed earlier, the Gulf of Tonkin incident Operation Northwoods.
Right.
Those events were carefully timed to achieve maximum impact and a desired political outcome.
So a big reveal event would likely happen when people are already feeling vulnerable or uncertain.
Exactly. It could be during a time of economic crisis, political turmoil, even a natural disaster.
Okay.
When people are already on edge, they're much more susceptible to fear and manipulation.
Okay, so they've normalized the idea of extraterrestrials. They've staged this dramatic event that has everyone terrified. What happens in stage 3?
Stage 3 is the savior. This is where governments or maybe some kind of global alliance steps in to offer a solution.
They present themselves as the protectors, the ones who can shield us from this new and terrifying threat.
But as we discussed earlier, there's a catch, right?
Of course. This protection comes at a cost. Increased surveillance limitations on personal freedoms, possibly even a global militarization effort in preparation for war against this perceived alien threat.
It's like that age-old trade-off between security and freedom.
Yeah.
People willingly surrender their liberties in exchange for the promise of safety.
Precisely. And those in power, they exploit that fear, that primal desire for security to consolidate their control and further their own agenda.
This all paints a pretty bleak picture. But if someone is orchestrating all of this, what's their ultimate goal? What's the end game of a UFO-themed PSYOP?
That's the question, isn't it? And it's one that we'll explore more deeply in the final part of our deep dive.
Right, so we're back to the final part of our deep dive. And we've been going pretty deep into this idea that, this whole UFO and drone thing could be like a carefully orchestrated psychological operation, this PSYOP.
Yeah.
And we've unpacked the 3 stages that Chase Hughes outlines.
Yeah.
The normalizations, the big U reveal, the savior. But I think the biggest question is still out there. Like, what's the end game here? Why go through all this trouble?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The why is always the hardest to pin down.
Right.
But, there are some compelling possibilities to think about.
Well, we touched on a few motives earlier, like distraction, exploiting fear to kind of consolidate power. But are those the only explanations?
Not necessarily. Hughes suggests another intriguing possibility. He proposes that they might be using these events as a way to gauge public reaction, to see how we would respond to an actual extraterrestrial threat.
So you mean like they're testing the waters, seeing how far they can push this narrative before people start pushing back?
Exactly. Think about the idea of an alien invasion. It's been a staple of science fiction for decades now. It's practically embedded in our collective consciousness.
Right.
So maybe they're tapping into that existing cultural narrative, seeing how we react, how much fear and uncertainty they can generate.
And that information, that understanding of our collective psychology, that could be pretty valuable.
Oh, absolutely.
For what, though? What would they do with that knowledge?
Well, it could be used to refine future PSYOPs, make them even more effective. Or it could inform their strategies for dealing with an actual real global crisis, whether it's a pandemic, a climate catastrophe, or even, an actual alien encounter.
It's almost like they're running this giant social experiment with us as the unwitting subjects.
That's a chilling way to put it, but it's not entirely inaccurate. And it raises some serious ethical questions, about manipulation, consent, and the use of fear as this tool of control.
We've been focusing on this idea of a UFO-themed PSYOP, but it feels like this is all much bigger than just UFOs. It's about understanding how information, perception, and fear can be used to shape our reality.
You're absolutely right. This goes far beyond UFOs. The tactics we've been discussing, normalization, creating this sense of threat, offering a solution that requires sacrifice, these are all hallmarks of PSYOPs throughout history.
Think about the War on Terror, for example. How fear and uncertainty were used to justify increased surveillance restrictions on civil liberties, even military interventions overseas.
Exactly. And the Cold War, with its constant threat of nuclear annihilation, that was another prime example. These tactics are not new. They've been used time and time again to achieve very specific political and social goals.
So what can we do about it? How do we resist this kind of manipulation, especially in a world where we're constantly bombarded with information from all directions?
That's the challenge, but I think awareness is the first step.
Okay.
Understanding how these tactics work, how they play on our emotions and our biases, that's crucial.
Well, we've talked a lot about Chase Hughes and his work on kind of identifying the signs of a PSYOP.
Yeah.
Are those tools enough to protect ourselves?
They're a good starting point. Remember, he talks about analyzing sources, being wary of those emotional triggers.
Right.
questioning the timing of information, looking for any corroborating evidence.
Right, and always asking that question, who benefits from this narrative?
Precisely. But it goes beyond that, too. It's about cultivating this healthy skepticism, this willingness to question what we're told, even if it comes from sources we normally trust.
So it's about thinking critically, doing our own research, and not just blindly accepting the narrative that's being presented to us.
Exactly. And it's about connecting with others who share our values, building communities of critical thinkers who can support each other in navigating this, complex and often confusing world.
That's a powerful message. So it's not about being paranoid or rejecting everything we hear. It's about being informed, aware, and engaged. It's about taking back control of that information flow instead of just letting it wash over us.
Well said. And remember, even if some of these events are orchestrated, it doesn't mean we're powerless. We can choose to resist that manipulation, to think critically and form our own conclusions based on evidence and reason, not fear.
This has been an incredibly thought-provoking deep dive. I feel like we just scratched the surface of a really complex and timely topic.
It is a topic that deserves, ongoing exploration and discussion, and I applaud you for diving into it with such curiosity and open-mindedness.
Well, thank you for sharing your expertise and insights. It's been a real eye-opener. And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has given you some valuable tools for navigating this increasingly complex world of information. Remember, stay curious, stay skeptical, and stay tuned for more fascinating deep dives coming soon.